Coming up next, from San Fran Freak Show, The Savage Nation, from Talk 910 KNEW.
No one else can say it that clear and that precise.
The Savage Nation. The afternoons of 7 Talk 910 KNEW.
Warning. The Michael Savage Show contains adult language, adult content, psychological nudity. Listener discretion is advised.
America's most exciting radio talk show, The Savage Nation. Here is Michael Savage.
What I've been talking about today in the Savage Nation. Coleman concedes, and that means a comedian, a socialist comedian, has now joined the other comedians on the Democrat side. And the good news for the Communist Party USA is that the communists are now filibuster-proof in the U.S. Senate. The Communist Party USA, Democrats, now have a filibuster-proof majority with the entry of the comedian Al Franken. And so, therefore, get ready for the end of America. We're also talking about the media obsession. Turn on the TV again, not stopping about Michael Jackson pill popper. There's a 5-second mention of what's happening in Iraq, and then back to wall-to-wall coverage of the king of pill popping. In the little times they're not praising a man who was accused of being a child abuser, they're attacking Sarah Palin, hailing the fall of the Republican Party, attacking a South Carolina governor, and praising the comedian Al Franken. Have you turned your television off yet? Or are you just not paying attention? Well, that's about it for today. There's many other stories, of course, in the Savage Nation. I told you earlier about the so-called victims of Bernie Madoff and his Ponzi scheme and how they want you to pay for their greed and stupidity. I want you to listen to the voices of a few of these people and tell me if you think they should be compensated with taxpayer dollars. You decide and listen. Go ahead.
He put his arm around my shoulder, and he said to me, "Don't worry, everything will be fine, and your investment will be safe with me."
He doesn't exhibit any emotion. There's no tears. There's no broken voice. It's just a recitation with inhuman recitation.
I don't believe he even has any remorse. This would have never continued for God knows how many years if he had remorse.
His wife was working right along with him. She's not stupid. She had to know.
Well, here's another one of these victims, Mr. Bert Ross. I'm sorry it happened to him, but here's what he thinks should happen to Madoff.
I urge the judge to do what he did, which was to sentence him for the rest of his life, that when he leaves prison, which means after his death, and he leaves prison virtually unmourned by anybody on this earth, that he will then go down to the depths of hell, where he'll join those other people who are in the mouths of Satan.
But what should happen to people who demanded 10% returns, 15% returns, every year off the backs of people who really work for it? Did they think there would be no consequences? Well, but Bert Ross thinks it's about a loss of trust. Listen to him again.
This is far more than the loss of money. That's terrible enough, and many of the people who invested with Madoff have addressed the court in terms of what it's done to their lives. But there was also a tremendous violation of trust. And trust is what we build everything we value on. We build our financial system on it. We build our relationships on it. We build love on it.
This week Bernie Madoff was sentenced to 150 years in prison. No one can deny that the guy was a vile, scheming, a con man of the lowest order. But how much better were some of his victims who demanded 10, 12, 15% returns every year, year in, year out, without questioning how it was done? How much better were a bunch of people who wanted to retire in their 40s and live off the hard work of other people? They've been everywhere in the media whining and complaining in the middle of a recession where people who have had to actually work hard for years just to get by are losing their jobs. And these Madoff victims are complaining that they have to get jobs. You have to listen to some of these people. There was an article by one of them that appeared in the New York Post. It was written by a woman named Sue Ambrosino, who was 56, and it was about how she and her husband, Dominic, who was 48, they had retired on their ill-gotten gains from Madoff and were driving around the country in their RV. Here's a quote from the article she wrote. Dominic is now forced to go back to work. He leaves at 4:30 a.m. to avoid the summer heat in Arizona. He's home by 10 or 12 hours later. Gone is our precious time together. Close quote. Well, her husband has to go out to work at an actual job. It may be a blessing for him to be out of the house and away from her. Here's another one. Phyllis Molkotsky, 62 years old, who had $2 million that she gave to Madoff, says this: I want the SEC to help us to get our lives back financially. The most important thing is to get restitution to his victims. Do you hear that? These people are victims of what? Well, maybe of their own foolishness. And they want the government and your tax dollars to pay them back for their bad investment. And investment means risk, Mrs. Molkotsky. You took a risk, and you made a lot of money, and then you lost a lot of money. That's called an investment. I frankly don't owe you a penny. By the way, Mrs. Molkotsky, age 62 apparently, has some children age 18 months that she has adopted that she wants to raise. Wow. This is the problem with our society. Too many people claiming to be victims of others, not victims of their own decisions. Too many people expect to be able to live a lavish lifestyle without really working for it. Too many people expect others to bail them out when they get into trouble. It's a mindset that's been created by a generation of welfare, a generation of children who were told that they couldn't fail, a generation of people whose first reaction when something goes wrong is to blame it on someone else, sue them, and demand the government pay them back. Well, let me read you one of these letters from Miss Ambrosino, published in today's New York Post. That is from Phyllis Molkotsky. She says, it's easy to express in dollars what I lost to Bernard Madoff. I invested $2 million, my life savings, at the end of 2001 with him, and now it's all gone. The amount includes the $300,000 I had redeemed to pay my income taxes through the years on the phantom profits I earned through his phony investments. But I've also lost a big part of me. I think part of me died the day I learned of the fraud, along with so many hopes and dreams of the future. I may lose my house in Rockland County. My dream of giving my 18-month-old adopted son a better childhood than I had was stolen from me. Now remember, she is 60-some-odd years old. She has an 18-month adopted son. I don't know, maybe she's altruistic. Then she says, and my plans to adopt another child so that my son wouldn't be an only child, as I was, have gone up in smoke. The stress may be worsening my Parkinson's disease. What? I'm sorry, she has Parkinson's disease and she's able to adopt babies? She goes on. And I no longer have the comfort and security of knowing I had money to fall back on. I found it devastating when that was taken away from me in just a second. I've lost faith in a government that I once believed in. Wait a minute. You mean in Obama? He was going to save her? She goes on. It blows my mind to think that the SEC could have stopped Madoff's fraud years ago when the agency was explicitly warned before I even contemplated putting my money in. Well, that's from a lawyer, I think. I find it hard to believe. I want Madoff to suffer along with anyone who helped him, but what I really want more than anything, she says, is for the SEC to acknowledge its negligence and its failure to protect me and the other victims. This is written by the lawyer. And she says, I want the SEC to help us to get our lives back financially. Yeah, right. That means you and I should pay for her failed investment. She says the Madoff sentence is only a small part of the story. The most important thing is to get restitution to his victims. Well, please, Mrs. Molkotsky, I have to repeat, an investment entails risk. With high rewards such as 12% a year, when I, Michael Savage, was making 1% in a bank, I didn't take the risk, so I didn't lose any money. You took big risk, and you had a big loss. End of story. I don't owe you anything. This is the Savage Nation.
Your money, your life. How to make sense of it all. I'm Rob Black. Join me weekday mornings at 10 on Talk 910 KNEW.
I take a wait-and-see approach.
Well, I'm not. Look, that's what they're announcing. We have to accept that for the time being. But there's an awful lot of question about how this election was run, and we'll see. I mean, we're just waiting to see.
We, like the rest of the world, are waiting and watching to see what the Iranian people decide.
I take a wait-and-see approach.
Well, I am someone who's going to wait and see. Waiting and watching to see.
We'll see. I mean, we're just waiting to see.
The Obama administration, which has an appease-first mentality, I think is putting our country at risk. The threat of war and terrorism is still strong, but instead of bolstering our defenses, we're making cuts to our missile defense program, which in wake of North Korea and Iran's nuclear mission seems like a terrible idea. Joining us today to talk about this is James Carafano.